The grains were already in my mouth before my brain caught up. Sticky, warm, pressed past my teeth by Eleanor's thumb like I was a toddler refusing medicine. I tried to spit, tried to twist away, but Marcus was holding my shoulders from behind, my own husband. And the dining room smelled like gravy and candles and something underneath it that I now know was fear. My throat started to close on the second swallow. I remember thinking very clearly, this is how... My in-laws shoved rice down my throat, knowing I was allergic, calling it pickiness, and they paid dearly for it. Hey everyone, I'm Delphine. Most people call me Del. I'm 34, I work as a dental hygienist at a small family practice, and until about a year and a half ago, I thought I had the kind of life you see on the front of a greeting card. Husband, little rental house with a crooked porch, a rescue mutt named Biscuit who chews shoes but only the left one. I grew up pretty isolated. My mom raised me alone. She passed when I was 26. So when I married into the Hollander family, I thought I'd finally landed somewhere with people. Big table, loud laughs, a mother-in-law who pressed her palm to my cheek the first time we met and said, "You're one of ours now, honey." I believed her. That's the part that still makes me wince. So, the allergy. I've had a severe rice allergy since I was a baby. Not an intolerance, not a preference. A documented, EpiPen in my purse, hospitalized 4 times in my life allergy. It's rare, and people don't believe it exists, which I've dealt with my whole life. White rice, brown rice, rice flour, rice vinegar, rice cereal, the dusting they put on the bottom of store-bought pizza. All of it. I carry 2 EpiPens. I read every label. It's a whole thing. Marcus knew. He knew before he proposed. He came with me to the allergist once, and the doctor straight up said, if she eats rice, she will go into anaphylaxis. There is no just a little. Marcus nodded like a bobblehead. He held my hand in the parking lot and said, I'll always have your back on this, Del. I promise. Write that down. I promise. The first time I met his mother, Eleanor, she'd made a casserole. Chicken, cream sauce, crunchy topping. I asked, just to be safe, what's in the topping? And she said, cornflakes, sweetheart, don't be paranoid. I ate it. It was fine. She laughed at me for asking. Marcus laughed too. I remember my face getting hot and telling myself, okay, they just don't get it yet. Give them time. Give them time. That became my whole personality for 3 years. His dad, Warren, barely spoke to me the first year. He was one of those men who communicates entirely through grunts and remote control adjustments. His sister, Tabitha, Tabby, was 2 years younger than me and had this way of complimenting you that felt like a slap. Oh, Del, that dress is so brave on you. Del, your hair looks so natural today. I love that you don't fuss. I'd smile. Marcus would say, that's just how she is. There was a brother, too, Quentin, youngest. He was quiet, watched everything, hardly ate at family dinners. I thought he was shy. I was wrong about that, but I'll get to it. The first real warning sign came at a 4th of July cookout, maybe 2 years in. Eleanor had made this pasta salad, and I was halfway through a bite when Tabby said, too casually, Mom, did you use the orzo or the rice pilaf base? And Eleanor said, orzo, without looking up. And Tabby said, you sure? And Eleanor snapped. I said orzo, Tabitha, don't start. I put my fork down. My lips were already tingling. I grabbed my purse, drove myself to urgent care, and shot myself with the pen in the parking lot because I was shaking too bad to wait. Marcus showed up 40 minutes later, red-faced, and said, Mom swears it was orzo. Maybe it was cross-contamination. You have to stop accusing her, Del. Accusing her. That was the word he used. I was in a hospital bed, my face swollen like a water balloon, and I was the one accusing? I should have left then. I know. Looking back, I can count the exact number of exits I walked past, and there were so many I could build a hallway out of them. Instead, I doubled down on being liked. I baked for Eleanor's birthday. I drove Warren to a doctor's appointment when his truck was in the shop. I took Tabby shopping and told her she looked incredible in a dress I secretly thought made her look like a lampshade. I kept a running mental list of every sweet thing any of them had ever done, and I polished that list every night before bed like it was silverware. Then Marcus's grandmother died, and everything slid. Her name was Ruth Ann, and she was the only one in that family who'd ever looked at me like a whole person. She'd hold my hand across the table and say, "You've got smart eyes, Delphine." She lived with Eleanor and Warren the last 2 years of her life. Dementia, mostly sweet, sometimes sharp. The week she died, the whole family pulled inward like a fist. Eleanor stopped answering my texts. Marcus started sleeping on the couch to not disturb me. Tabby posted this long, weepy thing online about the bond she had with her grandma that I had literally never seen evidence of in 3 years of holidays. That was the first thing I want to stop and say plainly. I think grief showed me who these people really were. Not because they hurt, everyone hurts, but because of who they decided to blame for hurting. And the answer, somehow, was me. The funeral was on a Saturday. Eleanor hosted the reception at the house. I wore a navy dress. I made 2 pans of green bean casserole because Eleanor had texted, finally, the night before, "Bring a side, something simple, nothing weird." Nothing weird. Okay. I got there early to help set up. The house smelled like roses and furniture polish and something warm from the oven. Tabby was arranging rolls on a platter. Quentin was standing by the window, staring out, a glass of water in his hand he wasn't drinking from. Warren was in his chair. Eleanor was moving between the kitchen and dining room with a tight little smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Del," she said, "put your casseroles on the sideboard, next to the ham." I did. I hugged Marcus. He felt like a mannequin. I whispered, "You okay?" And he said, "Fine." The way men say fine when they mean, "Don't ask again." People started arriving. Cousins I'd met twice. A neighbor who cried more than any blood relative. An old friend of Ruth Ann's named Morella, who pulled me aside and said, "You're Marcus's wife? Ruth Ann talked about you. She worried about you." I didn't know what to say to that. Morella squeezed my arm and drifted away before I could ask what she meant. She worried about you. I kept turning that over. We sat down to eat around 2. Eleanor had set the table formally. Her mother's china, the silver candlesticks, cloth napkins folded into fans. There was ham, the casseroles, rolls, a salad, a big covered dish in the center Eleanor hadn't unveiled yet. "I wanted to make Ruth Ann's favorite," Eleanor said, and lifted the lid. Rice. A whole steaming mountain of it. Herbs on top, buttery and fragrant. The table went quiet for exactly a second. My stomach dropped. "Oh," I said, as evenly as I could. "I won't have any, but it looks beautiful." Eleanor's smile thinned. "Delphine, today is not a day for your thing." "My thing?" I said. "Your pickiness," Tabby said, not even looking up. "Mom made it for Grandma. Grandma loved it. You're going to have some." "Guys," I said, trying to laugh, "I'm allergic. You know this." "You think you're allergic," Eleanor said. "You've been telling yourself a story for 30 years, honey. Ruth Ann always said it was in your head. She told me so, God rest her." That was a lie. I knew it was a lie the way you know your own name. Ruthann had, once, pushed a bowl of rice pudding toward me at Easter, and when I'd reminded her, she'd said, "Oh, sweetheart, of course, forgive an old woman," and pulled it back. She'd never mocked me about it, never once. I looked at Marcus. "Tell them." He was looking at his plate. "Marcus?" "Dell," he said, still not looking up, "can we not make today about you?" Something in my chest went very cold and very quiet. I stood up. "I'm going to go." "Sit down," Warren said. It was the most words he'd spoken to me in months. "You're being dramatic," Eleanor said, and she stood too. And she had a serving spoon in her hand, piled with the rice, and she was walking around the table toward me, and Tabby was laughing, this awful high little giggle, and Marcus stood up and came around behind me and put his hands on my shoulders and said, "Just try a bite, Dell, just one, to keep the peace, please." I said no. I said it loud. I tried to step back and his hands tightened, and Eleanor pushed the spoon against my mouth. I clenched my teeth. She kept pushing. "Open up, Delphine. Don't be childish." And Tabby was still laughing, and some of the rice was on my chin, and I was twisting my head, and Marcus was holding my shoulders harder. And then Eleanor's other hand was on my jaw, and her thumb was hooking into my cheek, and I opened my mouth to yell, and she stuffed it in. I gagged. I tried to spit. She clamped her palm over my mouth. "Swallow. Swallow, Delphine. It's just rice." I swallowed because I couldn't breathe otherwise. And then I did it again because she pushed another spoonful in. The tingling started almost immediately. Lips first, then tongue, then that horrible, creeping closing in the throat. My ears started roaring. My vision got sparkly at the edges. "My purse," I gasped. "My purse, EpiPen." "She's fine," Eleanor said, stepping back, triumphant. "Look at her. She's fine. She just needs to calm down." "Marcus," I wheezed. He had let go of my shoulders. He was staring at my face like he was just now seeing it. My lips were swelling. I could feel them. I could feel my tongue getting too big for my mouth. "Mom," Marcus said, a new note in his voice. Mom, where's her purse?" And then, and this is the part I have replayed so many times, Quentin moved. Quiet Quentin. Watching Quentin. He crossed the room in 3 steps, grabbed my purse off the sideboard, dumped the whole thing on the table, found the EpiPen, uncapped it with his teeth, and jammed it into my thigh through the navy dress. He caught me as I went down. "Call an ambulance," he said. Nobody moved. "Call an ambulance!" Nothing. He pulled his own phone out with one hand while holding me up with the other and did it himself. The last thing I remember from that room was Eleanor saying, "This is so unnecessary," and Quentin saying, very softly, very clearly, "Shut your mouth, Mom. For once in your life, shut your mouth." I want to stop here too, because this is the part I think about most. For years, I'd thought Quentin was weak. I'd pitied him a little, honestly. And when it mattered, he was the only one in that house who acted like a person. I had spent 3 years chasing the approval of the loud ones and overlooking the one who was actually paying attention. I don't know what to call that except a lesson I didn't want to learn. I woke up in the hospital. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. Quentin was in the chair next to the bed, asleep sitting up, still in his funeral clothes. When he saw I was awake, he said, "Don't go back there, Dell." I wasn't planning to. "No," he said, "I mean it. There's stuff you don't know." And then came the rest of it, in pieces, over the next few weeks. Ruthann, it turned out, had left a letter. Quentin had found it in her things the day she died. It was addressed to me. In it, She'd written that she was sorry she hadn't protected me better, that she'd watched Eleanor test me at meals over and over, that she'd tried to speak up and been shut down, that Marcus had been raised to believe keeping his mother happy was the same as being a good son, and that she suspected Eleanor had deliberately swapped ingredients at the 4th of July cookout years ago and panicked when it went as far as it did. Ruth Ann had written, "If anything happens to you at that table, Delphine, don't let them call it an accident." Quentin had been sitting on that letter for 4 days when his mother uncovered the rice. He gave it to the police. Here's what happened in the sober, not-made-for-TV version. Eleanor was charged. Assault, reckless endangerment. I'm not going to pretend I know all the legal words. She took a plea. No prison, but probation, a fine, mandatory anger management, and a restraining order I didn't even have to ask for because the judge ordered it on his own. Tabby wasn't charged with anything, but she lost her job when a coworker saw the local news story and forwarded it to HR. Warren had a small stroke about 2 months later. Not because of me, not directly. He was 71 and had blood pressure issues for a decade. But Eleanor had to become his full-time caretaker, which meant she got to spend her days wiping the chin of the man who'd told me to sit down. There's a version of justice that's loud. There's a version that's just life continuing on in the exact shape you made for yourself. They got the second one. Marcus and I divorced. He cried a lot. He said he didn't know what had come over him, that he'd been in shock, that his mother had a hold on him he was only now seeing. Maybe that's true. I think a grown man who puts his hands on his wife's shoulders while his mother force feeds her poison doesn't get to workshop his feelings on my time. I signed the papers on a Tuesday. I kept Biscuit. He kept the crooked porch. Quentin and I still talk. Not romantic, please God, no. But he calls on my birthday, and I call on his, and sometimes we just sit on the phone, not saying anything, which is its own kind of family. He moved 2 states over. He works at a bookstore. He seems lighter. I live in a little apartment now with a balcony the size of a placemat. Biscuit has a bed by the window. I keep my EpiPens in a drawer by the door, in my purse, in my car, and in my desk at work. 4 of them. Always. And I don't apologize for that to anyone anymore. The last thing I want to say is this. I kept thinking someone was going to save me from that family. A sign, a showdown, a big dramatic moment where the truth would finally land. It didn't work like that. It was 1,000 small moments where I told myself, not today, not this one. Until the day my husband put his hands on my shoulders, and I finally understood nobody was coming. I had to be the one to leave. The rest just happened because cruel people eventually run out of people willing to sit at their table. So, have you ever stayed somewhere too long because you didn't want to admit what you already knew? I'd really like to hear about it in the comments. I read every single one. If this story meant something to you, please hit that like button. And if you want to stick around for more, subscribe. I've got more stories, and I promise I'll keep telling them straight.